And we're so pleased to have Bob Friend here with us. He's, I'm from the 45th, and I'll tell you a little bit about how we found him, or he found us. There's an amazing story that never got told. I think it's amazing because we hear when bad things happen, especially, when it comes to the way things were during segregation and everything, and we know that things weren't good. That's common knowledge. But I grew up with a story that probably impacted my entire life. When my dad told me as a little boy, he didn't talk much about bad things in the war, but he would talk about good things. And I remember growing up and with him telling me about one of the best times he ever had in Italy. And I'm sure there were some of those more personal good times he left out, and I won't go into that. But he talked about landing at this base where there were all these black airmen called the Red Tails. And he said, we've never been treated so well, he said, in my entire life. He said, these guys took us in and could not do enough for us. And we stayed several days, and we didn't want, it was such a nice break from combat. And, considering the way these guys have been treated in the US, and they just opened their tents to us. Our group spent New Year's Eve there. Colonel B.O. Davis, their commander, supplied the alcohol for the New Year's Eve party. And it was just a wonderful time in our lives. Well, as I grew up, you kind of forget those things, but it kept coming back. So the more research I did when I became the historian, I talked to some of the other guys in this group, and it turned out that on December 29th in 1944, 17 B-24s from the 45th Bomb Group landed at Ramitelli. There was also one bomber from the 455th Bomb Group that landed there. And the reason these planes landed there, at least the ones from the 485th, was because of the extremely bad weather. There was snow on their own field, but Ramitelli was clear. So these guys landed uninvited, unannounced, unexpected. And they stayed 5 days. And, I know this, and to hear the stories that are coming out today from that experience, these guys didn't know that they had changed the world for some of us in the next generation because of the way we grew up. And I wasn't the only one that grew up hearing these stories, this story. My brother, my sister, and I, at different reunions, I learned that all of these guys, or so many of them anyway, had told their own children. And so the way I met Bob was we decided to have a reunion to get them together for the first time. And, we didn't have any funds, but we just said, we're going to do it. So we got the Tuskegee Airman National Historian together with us. Her name was Zelly Orr at the time. That was the historian at the time. And Zelly agreed to help us. And so we managed to get these people together. One of the guys that came to this was Bob Friend. Knew nothing about him, but I was asked to interview him. And it's harder than heck to get him to talk about himself and to say some of his accomplishments. So here I am, and I was interviewing him for Lucasfilm. And Bob sat down kind of smiling at me, and I sat down, and we started talking about the time he spent in Italy. And again, not knowing anything about him, and I said, Bob, how many missions did you fly? And he said, how many was a completed tour? He said, 50. I said, oh, when did you start flying those? And he said, I started flying those escort missions in June. And I said, so I'm guessing you finished up maybe, if it was like the bomber guys, maybe around August? He goes, yeah, that's about right. I said, did you go home then? He goes, no. I said, you were done, right? He goes, well, yeah. Did you go home? No. Colonel Davis asked me to stay and help him out. I said, oh, in an administrative position? Well, kind of. And I said, well, you didn't continue flying combat missions, did you? And he said, yeah. I said, when did you go home? And he said, late in 1945. I said, 45, not 40. No, 45. And I said, but you continued flying combat. And he said, yeah. I said, how many missions did you have? He said, oh, about 142. You know, I had to pry it out of this guy. And so during that interview, we got to know each other a little bit better. And I've, you know, get to see him occasionally now, and it's a real special treat. But some of the stuff still comes out. My second interview a year or two later with him, when we were at UC Riverside, that's when I learned that he was Colonel B.O. Davis's wingman. That never came out in the interview either. Wow. And I guess it was yesterday that something else came out when I mentioned this 142 combat missions. He goes, yeah, but those were just the ones in the P-51. I flew several more in the P-47. So without further ado, I'm going to let Bob talk, and I'll help him a little bit if he needs any help. But it's a true pleasure to have my friend, Bob Friend, with us today. Thank you.
Hello to everyone. I'm very, very proud to be here, really I am. And to represent, I think, a turning point in all of our lives, especially mine. But, after training, you know, we went to Africa. That was the first place. And so this is my first chance to see things like that. I'd never been out of the United States. And so when one young Arab guy came up to me and he said, hey Joe, you married? No. He said, Joe, I got 2 children. I said, good. I said, how old are you? He said, 17. So he said, what are you interested in seeing, Joe? So he called everybody Joe. So I said, well, you know, I'd like to see the Casbah. I heard famous movie star who told the lady he was going to take her to the Casbah, and she got all excited. So I'd like to see the Casbah. He said, I pick you up, I take you to Casbah. He would spend his time during the day washing the dishes and things, other things that soldiers normally would do, but they'd rather put them on the line. And so he was there working, doing some of those menial tasks. Well, anyway, he came by that night, and he started walking toward Algiers. We were in Algiers, and so all of a sudden, I see this great big wall, and there's nothing on it but signs saying off limits to all uniformed personnel, off limits, all uniformed. So I said, good gravy. He said, this is Casbah. I said, can't go in. So he said, you can go in here. I said, no. If I go in here, the MPs will get me. He said, no. MPs in the Casbah. So I said, well, if that's going to happen to them, why do I want to go into the Casbah? He said, you're the same as an Arab. So anyway, I didn't go in, but I did find out Casbah meant native quarters. But then from there we moved, you know, up in Sicily, and then establishing bases along the west coast of Italy. And we were in the 12th Air Force at that time. I was flying P-39s, an airplane that was really and truly designed to support ground activities. You knock a tank out with that big cannon in it had and things of that sort. So that's what we were doing. And then they came one day and said, we're going to turn all these P-39s in and get P-47s. So, and you're going to be transferred from the 12th Air Force to the 15th. which was being newly established, or had not long been newly established on the East Coast, around Barry. So, therefore, we now start to turn this airplane in and to try to get some time in the other. I heard about people having problems with the Italians, and I'm sure that it was rightfully so, because they were protecting everything they had. They brought all their farm animals into the house during the night because it'd be stolen if it wasn't. But we had one of the guys coming into land, and a farmer was crossing the runway with a herd of sheep. And needless to say, it wasn't long before there was a lot of mutton going around. The airplane got hit. The guy crashed, hurt him pretty badly, but he was at least safe. But we moved then by truck. We turned the P-39s in, and they were given to the Russians, who loved it. And we all took trucks to Ramitelli, Italy, and that's where we settled. Beautiful place, really. You know, it was a farm, and I'm gonna tell you, when you put your tents in, you could put them anywhere they wanted, just so you didn't get bunched up. So we were way out somewhere, putting it down. It's still part of the farm. And I said, what do? We got to clear away this corn, and it's called corn. So we can put the tent up. I said, yeah, okay. So I ate corn all night. we put our tent up out there. And then, of course, the local people did come. And they did a lot of things, you know. Not a lot of good things, and also a lot of bad things, because when we went on the way out on a mission, if everybody in the tent was going away, somebody would steal something. Couldn't help it. They needed it, and they'd steal it. So we learned how to protect it, though, and after a bit, I thought that the Italians treated us very nicely. I know that we had a guy over there too that worked in the kitchen, and he decided that, because I didn't drink or anything, I didn't smoke, I gave him my cigarettes, I gave him all these things. Oh, he thought I was the greatest guy in the world. So he wanted to take me over to see the people that his girlfriend's family. All right. So when I got there to the girlfriend's family, and we were sitting here and having a nice talk and stuff, and his next door neighbor came in, and he said in Italian to the guy, you will let your daughter see her Swartz? So, because I knew enough Spanish for him to not shut me out completely. I knew what he said, but then what he did was, he said, Roberto, ven acá. So I went over, and he rolled my sleeve up and showed me my sleeve. He said, see, that's Swartz. But I told him, Swartz. And after we moved to Ramitelli and became fairly well established, we started flying regular missions. And when the 29th of December came, and all those bombers landed in there, we had to make space for them.